Happy Friday, everyone. It is October 8th, 2021, 6:30 p.m. New York time. And I hope everybody had a great week, great trading week specifically, but great week nonetheless. And so, guys, today's video will be focused again on just some simple technicals, and we'll look at a couple of potential areas to look at next week. The last several videos have been in regards to using the moving average strategies, using the 20 and the 50, and I won't go back and rehash it. Those are posted from the last couple of weeks on the channel. And as always, guys, before we start, make sure you hit that like button on this video, and if you're just finding the channel, hit that subscribe button in the lower right corner and the bell notification icon below, so that when I post a new video, which as I always say is only once or twice per week, you'll be notified right away. And I always appreciate the likes. That certainly helps out to advertise the channel a little bit. Okay, nothing on this channel is ever for sale. I don't sell anything. I'll never try to sell anything on here. That's not the point. So you can feel free to watch it and just understand it's just my opinion. I don't make trading recommendations, certainly, but I just point out some strategies you can go and back test, which you should always do, and judge for yourself whether they work for you and your trading style, and you make your own trading decisions, though. So with that being said, what we're going to discuss today, guys, is, and I did a short series on this a while ago, but I'm going to go back to it because ultimately, from a pure simplicity standpoint, simple trend line strategies are really, really effective. As always, you still have to be disciplined and follow good money management and not chase the market, and all the things we always talk about. But from a standpoint of just looking at just simplicity, this is really great. So basically, that's all we're looking at here. So we'll start off. I'm not going to go through every pair, but probably hit 6 or 7 maybe. First of all, so today we had non-farm payroll and Canadian employment news, and the Canadian employment news was pretty good. The NFP was kind of from the US was kind of a mixed bag. The actual job numbers was way below expectations, but the unemployment rate and the average hourly earnings was good. So that always makes for pretty volatile trading because it's kind of up in the air, where the Canadian news was really strong. So being long bullish on the Canadian dollar is probably smart right now. Plus oil prices are up, and so that also supports the Canadian dollar because that's their major export. And so just keep that in mind going forward, and that's why I talk about fundamentals are important, though we don't get into it really deep here. But just keep in mind that the Canadian dollar is probably going to maintain some strength going forward, and the US dollar is probably going to be, neutral to maybe a little weak. So, all right. So, anyways, so let's look at this is dollar Canadian. Speaking of a good combination, so what I do, guys, is the first thing I do is I go out to the 4-hour or the daily. I like to do the daily, and if I can't see a trend line there, then I'll go to the 4. And I'm putting the long-term trend line in blue and my shorter-term trend lines in white. So you can see this long-term trend line. I drew this out a couple of days ago, and it's very clear. You can see these hits on this trend line. And I had noticed price had come back down. And so when it got to this area right here, if we go to the 4-hour, when it came down around this area, you can see all the support where it was respecting this trend line. Again, many traders see the same trend line, and so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I said, okay, well, let's see what's going to happen here. Are we going to bounce off this and go up again, or are we going to break through? And so I kind of knew that NFP would potentially be a catalyst to do that, and as you can see, it broke through. So now if you go back to the daily, I think this has a long way to go to the downside. If you just look to the left and all this space in here, potentially at least back to these lows, we'll see. But that alone is from where it is now. If that's all it did, that's 430 pips to the downside. Okay, so again, nothing goes in a straight line. So then if you go down to the 1 hour, I have this trend line I've drawn connecting these highs, and so all these points where it comes up and tags it is a good point to go short. Now obviously you don't want to sell it where it is right now, even on the market's closed anyways for the week, but you wouldn't want to sell this right here because more than likely you're going to get a bounce. And so I would be looking for this thing to pull back and then look for shorts. And especially after this initial pull through, it's quite possible you're going to get a move back towards this this blue trend line, which is again the longer term one. And so I would wait for a pullback back to somewhere in the area around this white trend line, and you might get a wick spike through here, but it's probably somewhere, we'll get back to somewhere in this zone right here, and then potentially look for short positions going forward. Probably not that far because the price has got to make some headway here. So we'll see, but in general that's what I'm looking for. All right, so but very simple, right? Daily chart, okay, and then blue trend line or whatever color you want. Make it different colors. And it's really important so you can kind of visualize the longer term trend line versus the short term. Okay, so I don't know, let's look at a couple more here. So here is the Aussie dollar, and so now this trend line here should be white. Breaking my own rules here, so let me change that. It's because I have to keep going in and changing it back. Okay, so here is the Aussie dollar, and this is the 1 hour chart. And again, we start on the daily, and you can see this trend line here on the daily was going down, down, down. Then we breached it right here. We came back. There was a long period of retest here, and this can happen, which is why you got to be a little bit careful on these daily breakouts, because ultimately what happens, you get a retest, and you can see price retested and just kind of bounced along the upper side of this trend line, but see, it went down about the 78.6 retracement or so. Sorry guys, I had a barking dog. Somebody was at my front door. I'm sure you heard it. I apologize. She's a little crazy. So anyways, so now I mentioned earlier about the US dollar being potentially neutral to weak. So let's see what happens with this. So now we had this breakout, we had this substantial pullback. Now if we go to the 1 hour, this one's in a little bit of conflict because I drew this trend line on the current price action, and it does look like this wants to go down. In fact, I drew this arrow. So this is one where I'm probably going to watch it a little bit. And if this does confirm to the downside, I probably will take a short, at least in the short term, based off of this. Okay, so it doesn't mean, and I think I said this in a previous video, it doesn't mean you cannot take, just because the longer term trend is broken above the trend line, looks bullish, it doesn't mean you can't take short positions on a shorter time frame, but you just have to keep in mind where's the longer trend, and the longer trend on this is, in theory, is up, but it doesn't mean this might not be a good sell trade. I mean, you can see we went up, we broke through, we came back, retested again right off the backside of this trend line, and now it looks like we're going down. So I'm potentially looking at the Aussie dollar as being short, but we'll see, at least in the short term. Okay, but again, simple trend line. So here's the euro dollar, and again on the long-term trend we are down, and we're down on the short term. So here's the long-term trend line, and usually you get at least 3 touches on this before any potential reversal. So we've got the first, the second, and eventually I'd expect this to trade up and hit off this, and then another push down. So but on the short term, we're still trending down here, and I do expect this looks very corrective, that this will turn and roll down. Okay, whether that's based on euro weakness or dollar strength, I'm not sure, but let's see what happens. Okay, and I wanted to show you let's see, I think it's euro Aussie. Yeah, let's look at euro Aussie. I'm going to take this moving average off just not to confuse things. So here's euro Aussie, and again I got my colors wrong here. Let's make this white because this is the hourly chart, or snow they call this. Okay, So you can see what happens here. You know, tag off the trend line, down, tag off the trend line. We did a little fakey breakout here. You know, that's going to happen. So that's why you have to wait for some confirmation. I usually like to wait at least 2 candles, if not more, on that breakout. And you see we got 1 candle break above, and then we came right back. So, but you can see what's going on right here. Okay, we went up and tagged this. We went down, made a new low, or back to the previous low. But you can see there's obviously a lot of buying going on in this area, because as soon as it got down here, the market bought it up, and we've closed right at the trend line again. So I'm theoretically maybe looking for this to break out to the upside. Now I'm going to want confirmation, because we've been in a downtrend for a while. But this is one of those things, you know, where you kind of see these double bottoms form, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? Price, you know, came screaming down, but it could not make a new low, and just came back to the previous low. That tells you there's a lot of buying going on in here. Now, will that hold? I don't know. I mean, it's too early to say. Today was Friday, so the market tends to go to sleep very early. Certainly by the time London closes, that's it for the week. And so that was the last several candles. That's why everything just kind of moved sideways the last 4 or 5 hours, because this is the New York afternoon session right here. Okay, so so let's see what happens. But I have this up arrow here because I'll be looking for a potential upside breakout. And if we go out to the daily, you see I don't have a blue trend line drawn on here, because I didn't really identify a great long-term trend line. I mean, you could say this was it right here, and we broke down. This is probably the best. And I got to make this blue, of course. Okay. So, you know, based on that, the long-term trend line, that this probably will continue down, at least back to these previous lows. So this is an interesting point this is at. But again, it doesn't mean there couldn't be a short-term long position here, because we've had this move down, and this could, you know, if you're an Elliott wave counter, this could be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're going to have a substantial move up to correct this downtrend. Then eventually we'll roll back over. So, you know, ideally, if this does break to the upside, my target would be at max, would be back up here at this blue, the bottom side of this long-term trend line. Okay, so if this breaks out, swings and heads back up, then, you know, potentially somewhere in this area up in here, you know, to look for some kind of retracement. Okay, and I'm not a big Fibonacci user, but we can put a fib on here, and that would bring us right to the 61.8 inside of this box. Okay, so somewhere between the 50 and the 61.8 is, if this does break out, is what my target would be. But again, you need to keep in mind that the long-term trend off the daily is still down based on this blue line that I just drew. Okay, it's very clearly has broken out to the downside. But again, it doesn't mean you won't have a short-term bounce, and you can either, if you're a long-term trader, you just want to ignore this move and just wait for the sell back down, you certainly can do that. If you're looking to be in the market and take a trade on a strong close up, I would certainly consider a long, but just understand that it's probably going to have limited life. Okay, and you know, may go on for a couple of days, but probably not too much longer than that. So, all right, so just keep that in mind. All right, here's the euro pound. So let's go out to the daily. I don't have a daily trend line drawn. This is very much like the euro Aussie in terms of, you know, we had kind of this breakout right here, and now we're pushing down. But you can see, you know, this very well might just be a fake breakout. But I do have this red arrow pointing up here. And again, this might be another situation where we might push up for a little while and then turn back down off the daily. And again, we had kind of the same situation where you've got this double bottom formed. It went up and, you know, had a little weak retracement, tried to go back down again, could not break these old lows, and now it's closed on the other side of the trend line. So let's see. But once again, I wouldn't expect to see the price go much higher than probably somewhere inside of this rectangle. Okay, but that's another one. It's very similar to the euro Aussie. And you know, things like again, I told you the Canadian dollar is very strong. So here's the Kiwi Canadian on the 4-hour chart, and this is best where I could draw the trend line. Obviously, there's no sell in here right now. This went right down today off the Canadian news, but I would continue to potentially look for shorts and kind of sell those dips. If you go to the daily chart and just kind of look, we've already, we've kind of taken out these lows down here. Well, actually, we're sitting right about at them now. So this is kind of a critical area. I expect maybe to see a bounce from here. So again, as I just said a minute ago, this is not an area to sell this. I'd wait until at least it comes back to the trend line. And you can see the common theme, guys. When there's a trend going on, take the best trades are in the direction of the trend when it comes back and hits the trend line. And really, you need 3 points on a trend line. You can extrapolate 2. So if you've got 2, so you got this one and this one, in hindsight, you say, okay, well, I've got these 2, so before any of this happens, you could extrapolate this out into the future, okay, and just say, okay, well, I'm going to line up the highs here and draw this out and see. And then, but we didn't quite get there, which is, you have to adjust it later and say, okay, well, this was a little false break, but this is really where it should be, okay? And so, but you need 3, but, and part of the problem is, guys, is that once you hit that third one, you might be late to the party, that's the one criticism I have about these trend line breaks, because you've got the first point, you got the second point, and now you've missed all of this. And it wasn't until here, somewhere in here, where finally you join the trend. You've already missed 3/4 of it, okay, potentially. And it doesn't mean you still can't, make some money, but this is one part of trend line trading that I wanted to kind of stress. That is, if you had to say there was a weakness to it, this is it. So that's why sometimes you want to be able to try to catch the reversals. And the way you can do that are things like I said with the Euro Aussie. Now, I don't think this will be a long-term reversal, but, where you kind of see it run out of steam. We've had multiple touches. You see it run out of steam, and then you get this big move back to the upside, and you can almost recapture all this that you lost potentially, okay? But that's the one complaint I have and that people have about trend line trading is because by the time it's been confirmed that the move has, for the most part, has probably already happened, and you might be late to the party. But like I said, you can catch reversals or major corrections off these trends, and it will retrace a lot of these moves, so you can still capture it. You just going the other way. And then if that downtrend is going to continue in this case, then you can hop back on the train when it starts to move back down, and you can pick up the next big move down, okay? So I hope that makes sense. If I go out to the Canadian yen, so this is what I want to show you that's obviously way in progress, and this was all driven by the Canadian news today. There's no real trade here right now. This is kind of gone. The area to get in it is, at these touches. I wouldn't touch this now. I suppose you could go to a short time frame and say, you want to trade this correction and a move back up to rejoin the longer trend. You could. And speaking of the longer trend on this, if you go to the daily chart of the CAD yen, you can see the blue line, which happened a long time ago, which is, we had this downtrend. We broke out on these candles here, and when we had a little pullback on this one, you see this big wick on the daily, and then we just went. So again, simple trend line, and then go, okay? So, and I think the pound yen is pretty much the same story. Okay, so the pound yen is probably just getting going, okay? So we had this downtrend, which is probably just a correction to this big up move. Blue trend line on the most recent price action showing the shorts. These were all short trades. Every time it came down, it came back up here. Until now on this today, this is on today's candle. This is one daily candle right here. So this was today's price action. We broke above here. And so I would probably expect a pullback at some point. So if you get in this right now, you may end up in a significant period of drawdown, because this probably will pull back at some point. And if it comes all the way back to the trend line, that could be a really substantial, 100 pip retracement. So I probably would wait on this one. I do think it will go, but I would expect to see a pullback here. Probably come down, take out this short-term trend line potentially, or at least back to these areas around here, and then have this go again. But keep an eye on the pound yen for you know, a bigger move back to the upside. Even if it gets back up to these highs, it's still over 300 pips. But be patient, because, you know, usually again after this first poke through, you're going to have sellers come in and try to push it back down, you know, you don't want to get caught in a big drawdown just to have it eventually go in your favor. Okay, but that's my opinion on the pound yen. And the dollar yen kind of looks very much the same as the CAD yen. So we had this breakout. I don't have a blue line drawn here, so let's put one on. Here's your breakout, okay, and now we've gone, and then we had another breakout here with the short term, and we've gone again. We see we pulled back, retested, and then we went. Okay, so we pretty much already had the pullback here. So I would be looking just for potential retracements and to have this continue to move to the upside. We'd have to kind of really go out and see where we're at in the weekly chart. And we are kind of at some key levels right now, so be a little bit cautious. But at the very least, I'd wait for some pullbacks here to maybe think about dollar yen long. This is not really a favorite pair of mine, to be honest with you, because the dollar and the yen can both be safe haven currencies. So they can be really conflicting with each other, you know, because a lot of times when there's a risk on, risk off sentiment going, the dollar yen can really be conflicted. But when it does finally break and trend, it's a very high liquidity pair, so it does tend to move. But because, like I said, they're both considered safe haven currencies, I'm cautious about trading it. I'd rather do something like the pound yen or the Canadian yen before or even euro, really any other yen cross before the dollar yen. But I'm not saying I don't trade it ever. So, all right. So again, guys, I would just recommend to start on your daily chart and look at the most recent price action. You know, kind of what is it doing, you know, that you can identify in a clean trend line. And if you can't, then don't bother. Just move on to another pair. But so, you know, again, you take dollar CAD, you can clearly see this was the you know, what was going on. This is more of a short term, because people may say, well, isn't this the most recent price action here? And it's really not, because you can't draw a trend line on this, because you're only getting 2 points here and it's already broken this low. So this is not the long-term trend line. Okay, the long-term trend line is this one. This would be your short-term trend line on the hourly chart. So you should be able to easily draw that trend line. We just go out to another one. Here's the pound kiwi, and you can see here's the long-term trend as I drew it. And then, you know, down on the 1 hour chart, we've got this short-term one, and so this is another one where maybe we broke out, maybe we'll come back up and, you know, retrace back up into this area somewhere, and then potentially move back down again. Okay, so simple trend lines, very effective and very simple. Okay, euro yen, this one's a little bit more complicated. It's complicated what it's doing now. You know, on the daily chart, we can clearly see the breakout, the retrace, and the go. But then we had another big pullback here. But I still think this is bullish, and I still think this will go up from this area here. But you can clearly see the daily break, you know, the initial pull, and then back. And you can see this is what I'm talking about. This is a daily chart. This is a significant pullback. You know, 250 pips. So you don't want to like go long in here. If you're going to go long, you've got to go long maybe around the second candle, maybe around here, and then, you know, ride up this initial wave and then get out, because you're going to eventually have a pullback. So if you look at this area right here on a shorter time frame, just as an example, you know, let's look. So let's go to the 1 hour and look back at this. So here was that, I know it's the same color, you know, here was that initial breakout, okay, that we saw on the daily chart. That's this right here. We go to the 1 hour, and this is what I'm saying, like, even though this, so here's that initial breakout, and then we broke through, we came out retested, and then we had this huge, retest back down to the trend line. Well, it doesn't mean you can't trade this. Even though it broke out on the daily chart, you can, trade this long if you get in early enough. You can see the breakout on the hourly chart up, and this is a nice reasonable little pullback. This is only a 1 hour chart. So if you had seen this, on the daily, say, okay, let me go to the 1 hour, look for an entry, you pull back, get in anywhere here. On this one, I guess, even if you got in here, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And then you went up, and then as soon as this breaks this trend line on the 1 hour chart, you're going to get out, because now this is the correction on the longer term time frame. You can see it came all the way back down. It came all the way back down, okay, and then went back up again, okay? And I do think it will continue to the upside, okay? So again, guys, the strategy is start on your daily chart, find the most obvious place where you can connect, at least 2, preferably 3 points where the trend line can be easily drawn. Your eyes should go right to it, and if it's not clear, do not even bother. Just go to another pair. Potentially, you could go to a 4 hour chart and see if you can find it on there, but otherwise, just move on to something else. It probably means that pair is in a very heavy consolidation zone, and it's probably not worth trading anyways. And then once you have that long-term trend line in, and make it a different color, and then you can drop to your 1 hour, which is my preferred entry time frame, and you can look for entries either in the direction of the trend every time it pulls back to that short-term moving, that short-term trend line. Get that drawn on there, and trade those retracements back. And then once price finally, if you've got a situation like the like the Euro Aussie, well, this is the short-term break, where it's potentially going to break out in the other way, that's fine. You can take this long, just be respectful of the long-term trend line. But you're going to eventually have ones, like any of these where it was going down, 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 and then eventually it breaks out, and now your eyes have to turn to long positions. But again, these pullbacks after these initial breaks on the daily chart, these are going to be, you're going to very often find these really long retracements that are going to go on a long time, and you can trade this initial breakout, but be prepared for these big pullbacks, and that's why you need to go to the shorter time frame, be aware of what's going on. And you can certainly trade this pullback as well, and your target should be back on the upside of this trend line, and then wait for it to break back up again for the longer term. Okay, so you can play it on both sides, just using that one trend line, okay, and using 2 time frames. Use the daily and use the hourly chart, and you can really make some nice simple trading decisions. And if you're patient and you wait for those touches to the trend line and wait for those breakouts, whether it's on the 1 hour or the daily, wait for those breakouts, then you can really do well. But just don't try to jump the market. Like on this move down, this was not the area to go short down here. The area to go short was up here or over here or over here. It's not down here. Once it's already pulled away from the trend line, it's too late. If you get in here, you're more than likely going to end up being stopped out. Because the market is going to pull back. It doesn't go in one direction. And you could always even just add a trend line here on the bottom side. You can see it, the market held these moves, 1, 2, 3, and it bounced. So you could always add a trend line on the other side of the trend too. So if it's a downtrend, this is your main trend line connecting the highs, but you could always put one down here and connect the lows too. And you can be pretty assured that every time it hits one of those, that trend line touches, it's going to reverse, okay? So that's another option to keep yourself honest about when you're getting into these things, okay? So I hope that's clear, guys. You might have to watch this again, but it is very simple. It's just using simple trend lines on a longer time frame and a shorter time frame. Look for your pullbacks, look for your breakouts, and use the shorter time frame for re-entries when it's trending strong, and just go with it, until the direction changes. And then play it the other way based on the trend line break. So all right, guys, so I'm going to leave it there. We're on a half an hour, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the weekend. Leave me any comments or questions below, and we will talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.